Welcome to the HR Community Podcast. My name is Shane O'Neill, founder of Civitas Talent, the HR and HSE recruitment community. Each episode, we will host HR leaders and discuss their journey and discover best practice HR solutions across the HR industry. Whether you're a CEO, HR executive, or operating across the wider HR space, this podcast is for you. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment and share your reviews. Enjoy the episode. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Community Podcast. This morning, I'm joined here with Meredith Crowe. Meredith is the Senior Vice President, Global People and Culture for Telix Pharmaceuticals. Good morning, Meredith.
Good morning, Shane. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. We were just having a sort of off the record chat about how hectic we all are, and it's a really good time to jump on the podcast with you and flesh out a couple of HR insights and trends. But before I do, tell us a little bit about yourself, Meredith, who you are. Tell us a bit about your role and organization.
Yeah, sure. So Meredith, I am a New Zealander or a Kiwi by background, in case you can't tell by my accent. We're going to have some accent fun, I think, on this show.
Yeah, that's right. We might get the subtitles going.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I work for Telix Pharmaceuticals. We're a radionuclear drug development company. We IPO'd in 2017, so
Awesome.
have had a bit of a run at the commercial side now. And Telix actually cracked the ASX 100 this week. So
wow, that's exciting.
Pretty big week for us. We're a bit of celebration internally. We're feeling very excited about that and very proud of the team and all the work that's gone in. So really, really interesting time to be with Telix and be in the business. So prior to Telix, I was working at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne as well. So I've spent my sort of HR career in health or oncology, sort of adjacent industries, which has been very, very interesting, working with very highly technical, highly sort of cutting edge kind of disciplines and people has been really interesting. And that difference between sort of public sector and private, publicly listed company has been, super interesting as well. I feel really, really lucky to have the experience that I've been able to have across similar industry, but different kinds of businesses and organisations, even though we're all kind of pulling in the same direction towards, better, longer, healthier lives for people, with rare disease and cancers. Yeah.
That's so amazing. And I guess before that, if we were to kind of track back, like where did it all begin with your HR journey?
Well, look, I think I've listened to a few episodes of the podcast, Shane, and I think like most people who really hit their stride in PNC, or many people who hit their stride in a PNC career, didn't start in PNC. They've started in a different sort of role or a different discipline. And so for me, I'm actually a graphic designer by trade. I've got a media design degree and a master's in design thinking, which I got in Wellington. And so I moved to Melbourne and was working in a sort of small design agency. And I sort of made a move pretty quickly from being a hands-on designer to doing studio management and account management. Like I sort of early on realised I was better with people than Photoshop. So sort of had started to, make that move. And the business that I was working for went through a period of change. And as a sort of a baby staff member, like I sort of didn't know how to manage that myself. Like I didn't know how to set boundaries and kind of, manage myself through that change and communicate properly with my leaders about the change and what I needed and what I was experiencing. And I went from really loving that job to really just not being able to cope with it in about a 6-month period. And I went on holiday, went back to New Zealand for a week, and spent some time with friends and family and that sort of stuff. And every time somebody asked me how my job was, this was a role that I'd been like raving about up until 6 months ago. I just kind of shut down. Like I panicked, I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to say, I don't know what's going on. I can't and over that week, I sort of realized that like I wasn't okay. Like I'd actually sort of crashed, out of this job that I'd loved. And so I went back, when I got back to Melbourne, I resigned that Monday. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. I had about $1,000 in the bank, I think. Like it was a bit of but I've just completely burnt out of that role and that career. And so that was a really formative experience. And I think it's easy to look back on those like really difficult things and say, I'm really glad that happened. It's easy to look back and say that, but I am really glad that happened, because what happened then is one of the benefits of working in that business was that we worked for these very large clients with these big titles and big structures and big sort of corporate structures. And coming through little old design school in New Zealand, I didn't even know that some of these jobs existed. I worked with somebody who had a job that was like board of management experience manager or something like that. It was just, and I still can't quite believe that that's a job, to be honest. But these people have these jobs that I just never heard of. And so coming out of that experience, I decided I wanted to work in a central service in a large company so that I could watch a whole lot of people do their jobs and figure out which one I wanted, effectively. And at the time for me, that meant either HR or finance or IT. Those were the central service roles that I knew existed. And that's how I got into HR. I applied for a 3-month HR admin cover contract, and away we went. And I really took to it. Like I'm a people geek. Like I 100% am. Like I listen to podcasts about group dynamics in my weekends. Like I find it so interesting the way that groups come together and perform. What makes a group greater than the sum of its parts. And what makes a group less than the sum of its parts? Like what's going wrong when individually people could actually do more than they're able to do together? Those kinds of questions about how we get teams and units working, and then how that all feeds up in those bigger, larger structures that we've got. I find that so interesting. And so I took to it. I took to it like a real duck to water, and here we are. I mean, I've been at Telix coming up, it'll be 3 years in October, and I've spent a couple of years in the SVP role now, and it's just like, it's such interesting.
I love that.
I love it.
And what's really cool actually is, as we talk about it, when you started your sort of story and your background, and you were talking through the challenges, I guess, with that first initial role. But then, as we started to talk about the HR, it's like your whole eyes lit up, and you could really just hear the enthusiasm and the passion. But it's really cool. It's really cool to feel that kind of energy and passion and for what you do. If I was to like talk a little bit about that feeling where you were like, oh, I'm not sure this is for me. Like, what were if you can remember, what were the kind of initial signs? Because it's really interesting. Like I talk to people being in recruitment on a daily basis, and I have these conversations with people, and some people, they want to move for different reasons, whether it's money motivation, whether it's location or whatever the case, to advance their career. But some people just don't want to be where they are. What were the kind of triggers for you, or the signs? Can you recall?
Look, I think it was tough, because it's not that I didn't want to be there. I really did. I loved it. I loved the work. I loved the people, but the role design and the org design and my own ability to manage that transition and communicate about what I needed in the change, it wasn't there. Like I was a baby. I was 25. Like I couldn't, but I also had this deep desire to be good at it and to be what people wanted me to be, and to really deliver. And I burnt out. Like I knew that I had, because I used to go home on a Friday night, huge hours, huge stuff, whatever. The design industry is a pretty like rock star industry. Like it has high expectations of, people's commitment, which is fine. Like, I'm certainly not shy about hard work, but I would go home on a Friday night and I'd wake up on a Saturday morning feeling good. Saturday morning, sleep in, beautiful, cup of coffee, whole weekend ahead of me. Yeah. And then as the weekend went on, by the time it got to Sunday afternoon, like I was sick to my stomach. Like I was like, that sort of anticipation and anxiety about the week coming. I was like I just knew it was going to be a shit fight. I don't know whether I'm allowed to say shit fight on your podcast.
You can say whatever you want.
I knew, but again, I don't blame the business. That's the other thing. Like, it's not anybody's fault. It was just a perfect storm of like my desire to be everything that I could possibly be.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to set my own boundaries at that time. I didn't have anyone. Like, the other thing about small companies, I think, is that there's quite big jumps between seniority. Like, quite often you do have a baby employee reporting to a very senior employee, which sounds like a cool opportunity, but actually structurally and from a learning perspective, that's incredibly hard. And so, like, I didn't have anybody that I could model off to really know what was reasonable and know how to set those boundaries and do that properly. And I just couldn't, and I couldn't communicate. Hindsight's 2020, and I work in people now. So I look at this kind of stuff and I know what these problems are, and I know how to talk about job design and, change management and, all that sort of stuff. Like, I know how to talk about that now. At the time, it was an identity crisis. I was like, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. But I think those signs in my body around feeling very anxious and feeling very worried, but also, having conversations with people who loved me, who were looking at me and going, where are you? Like, what's going on? Like, you're usually this sort of like gritty, determined, bouncy person. Like, where is your energy now? And being open about that with people who I trusted. Like, I needed them to hold up the mirror as well and say, whoa, and like, this is a decade ago now, but it's still, I can feel what it felt like to be that person and feel like my whole world was crumbling. I'd gone to design school. That's what I wanted to be. I was getting ready and in a studio and kind of, trying to be, an up and comer in that industry. And I just couldn't, like, just the whole environment and where I was at the time, I couldn't sustain it. And I'm, like I said, I think it's easy to look back on things and say, I'm really glad that happened, but I am really glad it happened because I very much, I have a big job now, and I work incredibly hard, and I still have that thing where I absolutely do not want to let people down. I want to do things as well as I can for the people who rely on me to try and do that. But I also know what it feels like to burn out. And so I know that that's not what's happening to me. Even when I've had a huge week, I can sit down and I can get in touch with the body and be like, how do you feel? And I still feel engaged and
I love that.
Passionate and excited and determined, tired for sure, but sort of like, wow, I've used all my brain this week. I'm not making any good decisions.
It's a different tiredness.
And so I'm grateful for the experience of having really crashed out of something that I really wanted, because I know what that feels like now. And I know even when I've had a huge week in people, that's not where I am. I'm not in that zone. So look, it's formative. I think it was a really formative experience and really, really important, very unpleasant, but really important.
And something I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to. I mean, I know I can relate myself, but I know that everyone's really keen to hear about current role and a little bit about your journey there. And when we first caught up, if you recall, we started to talk about the topic of high growth. And high growth is something that is thrown at me by a lot of organizations when it comes to recruitment. Well, especially, maybe post COVID when there was a lot of growth. Now it's there's a lot of industries that are kind of tightening the belt a bit. But tell us about your journey with high growth, because I feel like high growth from a people and culture perspective can mean a million different things to a million different people. There's obviously the growth and the scale of the workforce and the business, but you took it to another level because there was IPO, there was listing, there was ASX. So talk to us through a little bit about that and your journey, kind of scaling the business.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. There is sort of people growth and there's financial growth and then there's business growth, as you say. And depending how geeky ASX, release geeky your listeners are, they may or may not know that we did actually withdraw the IPO process. So there's a whole bunch of press releases out there about why Telix made that decision, if anybody's interested in that. And certainly, but you've got to be, I mean, speaking of growth, right, you do have to take some risks.
Yeah.
And you do have to be, if you're not making mistakes and you're not having things not quite go the way you thought they were going to, then you're not trying hard enough. And I talk to my team about that quite a lot, because I think the people stuff in a high growth environment is tricky, because people have different expectations. If we're coming in from a larger company, if they're coming in from a smaller company, they come in and systems and structures are set up in a way that is hopefully appropriate for the size that we are now, but they're going to change. And I've experienced a huge number of changes and processes and systems and sign-offs and bureaucracies, and there's heaps of things that are trying to keep pace at the right pace, for where the business is. And so that change and openness in the workforce is incredibly important. And so when we are bringing in talent, and we bring in huge volumes of talent, we do a lot of that internally, because we certainly work with agency partners where we need to, where we're looking for something really specific, or there might be a different, there might be something that we need that support on, but we do vast majority of our own talent acquisition work, because when you're deciding to join a company, especially not especially any company, it's like dating, right? Like, you're sort of sitting across the table from someone and you're like, oh, do I like this? Is this okay? Like, do we have a good vibe? Like, how's this going? Both parties need to be able to make a really good decision about that. And so for me, my team being in the business, working in the business, they know what it's like working in the business. And so they can have a really honest and a really a frank conversation with somebody, because I don't think there's anything to be gained from tricking people into joining, and not that anybody does that on purpose, but what happens is that people get excited, hiring managers get excited, and they're like, this is amazing. They get excited about that chase, of trying to bring in, the talent that they want. And nobody, I don't think, oversells it on purpose, but you do need to ground people's expectations in what it really is going to be like.
Sure.
And so when we're talking about growth, we do, one of the big risks with people growth, especially, I think, is business knowledge and business continuity. Because if you've got a whole team who are new, or you've grown a team from 2 people to 8 people in 6 months, right? 6 of those people are sort of looking at each other going, do you know how this is meant to go?
Yeah,
and in a highly regulated, highly technical, highly complex business like ours, that sort of business history and that understanding of all the little slices that need to come together is really, really important. And so for us, we think, bringing in somebody and having them go, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, and heading out the door again, I know the math around what that quote unquote costs the business, but that really costs us, because we're growing. Our average tenure, we're trying to keep that up and get it higher, right? Not bring it down. And so when we do make a wrong call, it's actually the business continuity and the business loss and the relationship continuity and that connectedness, that takes the biggest hit. And 100%. In the environment where that's changing all the time, those hits, to people's relationships and people's resourcing can have quite a big impact on the culture of how people feel about what we're trying to do. So from a people perspective, I think how you make a call about who you bring in is incredibly important. I mean, the flip side of that is it is also good to take risks on people, and I've said this over again in my business, a learning orientation, a growth mindset is the biggest factor of long-term success in our business.
Yeah,
because it's growing so fast. You've got to keep up.
Yeah.
If you're not gonna learn at least at the rate that the business is learning, then it's not going to be a good time after 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whenever that happens. And so we're really looking for people who are change forward, manage ambiguity, manage complexity, and who are going to come on that growth journey with the business as well.
100%. Yeah. And you talk about the journey there, and I jump on that because I'm sure and certain you've had conversations with people, and maybe some of them are with the business, some of them decided not to, but where you're having that conversation around the journey. And I know people get excited about startup and scale up, and this business is growing. Like, it'd be so cool to be part of that journey, but then that journey has a lot of challenges and speed bumps along the way as well. Have you encountered much of that, just I guess in terms of managing people's expectations and really sort of giving them the bigger picture, warts and all? Like, this is actually the reality of that growth, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, but very, very dark right now.
Well, I mean, I think you've got to be on board for that, right? There's pros and cons of any culture. And I think I've got a real advantage in being able to look at that coming from public sector, which has pros and cons in terms of working in the public sector, right? Like, very stable, high job security, heaps of good stuff, like really purpose-driven organizations. You're surrounded by other people who are, really purpose-driven. Like, you don't, working in the public sector was a beautiful experience, right? There are pros and cons to every kind of business and every kind of culture. And so, like, working in a high growth company is exciting, but it's not for everybody. Like, it's one of those things that kind of sounds glamorous until you do it, right? Like, being a manager, managing people sounds glamorous until you do it. Traveling for work sounds glamorous, and then you realize it's like 5 a.m. flights and hotel meals for one, and being horribly jet lagged for 2 or 3 days a quarter. It's working in a high growth business is one of those things that sounds glamorous until you do it. And really, what it is and what it means is that you are going to be changing and trying and failing and competing for attention within the business. You're going to be competing for, scaling businesses tend to have more money than time, right? Sure. And so it's not budget that you're angling for, it's attention. Like, you need people to do the things that you need them to engage in your processes and your change processes, and you need somebody to fill in this form and do their performance review and fill in a survey about something, and that's just on the people side. Like, if you think about what my business is trying to get everybody to engage in, like, it's a different kind of challenge, and it is heaps of fun. And if you're the kind of person who, can cope with pretty high levels of ambiguity and just kind of make a decision and not worry too much if that was the wrong one and just kind of keep moving, not be attached to something because it's how you've done it, not be attached to something because you put a lot of energy into building it. If you're somebody who's willing just to bounce along and change and keep it moving and get the best of it and dive deep where it matters and not worry where it doesn't, you have to be one of those people who's not going to sweat the small stuff,
100%.
And who is comfortable with those fluctuations in workload as different things happen. Sometimes we have big weeks, sometimes we have smaller weeks. You also have to be somebody with a pretty strong, I think, personal resilience, somebody who can manage their own boundaries and their own time and say, look, I'm comfortable with this, I'm not comfortable with this, and like, I try, we talk about, like, also the global business adds another layer of complexity around time zones and meetings and trying to get things done. And, I always feel a lot of pressure as the end of my day comes up, because I'm like, anything that I don't get off to the US or to Europe now, they are going to be waiting a whole nother day. Like, it's not a difference between sending something at 4:30 p.m. and 9 a.m. It's like, if I don't send it by the time I sign off, it's 24 hours before they actually are able to move forward with it. And so that kind of 24-hour pressure, you've got to be somebody who can be like, that's fine, I've got my boundaries, I've got my priorities, and do that in a way that still builds relationships and builds the people's side. So look, it's complex and gritty and interesting, but I totally, every now and then, if somebody hits an interview with me, it means that they've gone through all the stuff about CV and blah blah blah. We've decided that they're qualified, right? If you hit me in an interview phase, it's because we're talking about this stuff. Like, we're saying, are you the kind of person who is going to thrive in this environment? Because there's no kindness and bringing somebody in who's not going to have a good time. I really would hate to do that to somebody. And in the same way, there's no kindness in trying to keep somebody who's not thriving. And, that's the other side of it, is making sure that we do have the right things in place, the right methods in place, the right trust in place, that if somebody wants to come and say, I think I've done my time, we can say, thank you so much, and we can explore what else might be possible. Like one of the best case scenarios is, and this happens a little bit, where somebody might come and say, look, when I joined, I didn't have to manage people, and now I've got 8, and I actually don't like it. And can I do something else? And I'm like, yes, you can. Like that's best case scenario, is that somebody can proactively say, I'm actually not enjoying this part anymore, but let's find that, one of the benefits of growth is that there are other things that people might be able to pick up.
Another seat on the bus.
Yeah, absolutely. And so where people have that sort of maturity and that humility actually to say, I don't love this part, it's again something that sounds glamorous, but it's not suiting me. Then quite often we can find something else, another way for them to contribute, and then everybody's better off. So look, it's I think the way that you treat people all the way through that process, the autonomy and the authority that they feel that they have to be part of the design of how this goes is really important, because I am never going to keep up with all the change. For me to keep people's position descriptions up to date, I would probably have to hire 2 people and sit them there and have them do that and only that, because things change so fast, and it's all interconnected, and it's all incredibly complex. And so I need people to feel like they have the authority and the opportunity. If somebody's position description is really important to them, they can update it and send it to me, or send it to their regional director of P&C and say, I think this is what I'm doing now. I've checked this with my manager. Can you file this, please? Like people have to take ownership of some of that stuff. Because the thing about a scaling business is nobody is doing that for you. There's no time. There's no time for that. We're trying to move as fast as we possibly can without tripping over ourselves, right? We really just don't have time for that sort of like little things like that.
And even as you're just describing all those different, if we call them characteristics maybe, but as you describe all these different characteristics, from the growth mindset to that ability to be resilient and, fail fast, fail forward, fail often, just get back up, like that paints a picture to me of an entrepreneur, which is really interesting. And now that I'm maybe thinking out loud, it's in a lot of startups and scale up businesses, sometimes we look at the founders and the directors as the entrepreneurs, but really it's everyone in the business. And if you've got that entrepreneurial mindset, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out and want to start a business, but you've got that mindset and ability to work through the different puzzles and speed bumps and be agile, have that growth mindset. So you're sort of touching a lot of those characteristics as well, regardless of where you sit in the business, whether it's sales, marketing, people, etc. So no, that's really cool, really interesting.
I think about it very consciously, because I think I have to be able to explain this to people. Like if I'm really helping people make a good decision for themselves, then I have to be able to give them a real picture, right, of whether you want to come and be part of this rocket ship. But I was thinking about it, because when I took on the SVP role, I was thinking about the learning that I would need to do. And man, I am still learning, and I know I'm still learning. And it's a delight, because every quarter, like if I've got a project that runs for more than 3 to 6 months, right? Like let's say we're doing something and we're reviewing something and it's round to go. By the time I get 3 or 6 months into that project, I'm thinking, if I was starting that now, I would be changing these things. And so that's how I know that I'm still massively on that learning curve. Because even 3 months ago, Meredith, 6 months ago, Meredith, I'm like, man, I know heaps more than she knew. And exactly. So I'm sort of keeping on top of that, just for myself, and to be like, am I still growing? Like, where are these areas that I'm expanding? Because it's a real responsibility to be as much as we possibly can to enable the business to be able to continue to reach its potential as well.
Definitely.
But the 2 big things that I was thinking about when I transitioned into the global role, the first one is like, there are 2 things I had to learn leaving the public sector in particular. The first one is how to spend money, because in the public sector, there is no money. You have to go through like 12 committees to get any money. And so what I learned working in the public sector is that I could do anything that I wanted to do as long as I could do it for free. And so I got very, very used to doing my own stuff and designing my own stuff and putting together my own workshops and rolling them out, without relying on a IP, that somebody else had or whatever. So I got very, very used to doing that sort of build. What I had to learn coming into a growth organization, and particularly a publicly listed company, is like sometimes you're better off to buy what you're doing rather than build it. Yeah. And so you've got to think about a balance of those things. Like, is it right to build or is it right to buy? Because buying is faster, but building is bespoke. Yeah. So like you've got to decide what's right to insource versus outsource for your own practices. So that's been super interesting for me. Still on that journey for sure. And then the second one was about sort of like, I thought that I could manage ambiguity when I was at PMAC. Like I thought that was a skill of mine. But the difference is that when you're in the public sector, like the end goal is very clear. Like what you are going for is there. It's planned. There's a 20-year strategy down from the government. There's a 15-year strategy down from the health department, and it cascades down into the hospitals. And you basically like the road's laid out. The question is, how fast can you get there and how much pain are you going to create for people along the way? So you want to try and do it fast and smooth, not painfully and slow and bumpy, right? But in the private sector or in the public listed sector, there's no pathway. Like you could decide you can't do everything, so you could decide, right, talent acquisition is the activity that we're going to rock for the next 24 months. 50% of my brain needs to go into thinking about how to really make that a gold standard set of activity for the business. Or I could say the medium-term strength of our workforce is going to be diversity. I'm going to put 40% of my brain into how to make sure that we are building structures and systems and building a market presence and building a brand proposition from an employment perspective that really make sure that we are attracting and retaining and creating value for and from the most diverse kind of thinking and people that we can get, right? Or I could say we're going to be a learning institution first. Yeah. We're going to set up a Telix university and we're going to, So there's no single path in this kind of business. You have to decide. You have to talk with people. You have to consult. I've got to present to my executive team. I've got to present to my board. But it comes from the decision making that we make, not somebody that's decided what the 2025 health strategy is going to be. Right. So it's different in that if you're waiting to be told, you're already behind.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think that's back to that sort of entrepreneurial thing that you said, Shane. Like it's like, if you're going to sit there and wait for somebody to tell you what to do, then I think you're already probably behind the 8 ball in this kind of company. Yeah. Wow.
Great analogy. I love it. Look, I can imagine that anyone listening to this is getting the same energy and passion through as I am. Like it's amazing. No, it's really cool to hear it. Honestly,
I get really excited about it.
Which is
but
cool.
I feel incredibly lucky and incredibly grateful that I really do derive deep meaning from the work that I get to do. Like I find it, I love my people, I love my team. I know you're not meant to love people in the workplace, there's a HR no, but like it all comes together to feel incredibly important and worthwhile. And I derive a deep satisfaction from getting to do the work that we get to do. Yeah.
Amazing. No, that was amazing. It honestly was. And I know you've got a busy day ahead, so I will wrap it up there. But thank you so much again for jumping on, Meredith. It's been so cool to not just hear about the Telix journey, but obviously your journey as well, and that journey over the last decade and where you were and that kind of high growth type environment. So for anyone listening that doesn't know what high growth is or has questions on high growth, that's high growth.
Yeah, come and talk to me, because I mean, in case that's not obvious, I could talk about it all day.
Yeah. Love it. No, all good.
Thanks so much, Shane.
Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you for tuning in to the HR Community Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe and share your views and comments below. This podcast was brought to you by Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Whether you're a candidate looking for a new role or organization looking to secure brand new talent for your team, please get in touch with us today. Thank you.